No, I'm up on the northern beaches.
Which what? Yeah, great spot. What's that beach?
That's Whale Beach.
Oh, you're up there, oh, mate. What a great spot.
Mate, it's paradise, I tell you. So,
Great choice by you.
yeah, I've been wanting to get out of. I had been wanting to get out of Bondi for quite some time. Probably about 4 years before it actually happened.
Mm.
Um, in fact, for a number of reasons, I'm sure you're familiar with, but mainly like number of people, parking, um, number of people and parking.
Mate, I get it. I get it. I had those two reasons in my big bundle of reasons to get out as well. I saw I was actually up at Luke Hines' house on the weekend, just kind of reminiscing a little bit. And fuck, mate, he's got a great setup up there. But yeah, he gave Sydney a second crack, and it reinforced why he moved out in the first place.
Be back up north.
Yep, he's back up. He's about 30 minutes up the road from here, so he's up just near Kingscliff. Great spot.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, good one. Where?
great spot. I'm in Byron, so exactly where I want to be. The only two spots that I'm really drawn to in Australia at this stage of my life, anyway, is Byron and Newcastle.
Byron and Newcastle, right? Why?
Yeah.
Why Newcastle?
Two ex-girlfriends are from there, but
That's a reason not to go.
yeah, it's a very good reason not to go. It's just it's got enough of a vibe, but it's convenient as well. Like fucking the beaches are amazing. I've tried, I've spent time in Melbourne, spent time in Adelaide, and I just realised, how important it is for me to be kind of by a beach with a bit of a vibe, but nothing too, like I just felt anxious the whole time I was in Sydney. I was nowhere near the best version of me, nowhere near it. So Newcastle and also, right?
It takes you a while to realise that because you're in a suburb like Bondi at a time in your life that's what you think you want. You want to have close proximity to bars and clubs and restaurants but that might not really plug into your psychology and how you're actually made up. Like I'm realizing this sort of at the tender age of 44 that all through my adolescence and late into my sort of late 20s, really, I was going to bars and clubs and drinking excessively because I was anxious about being there, which kind of, just to deal with being there, I would drink. And it's like, well, if you don't go there, you don't get anxious. You know what I mean?
Yep. Oh, mate, I resonate with that massively.
But you think you should be there because that's what everyone else is doing in your peer set,
Yeah, resonate with that massively. Yeah. Mate, where do you want to go with this interview? Should we just what's your thought process?
Oh, well, just for transparency, I've hit record.
Beautiful.
Well, mate, I guess it can go in any direction. There's no agenda per se. I don't have a string of questions I want to fire at you, but I guess let's start from, well, what triggered it was that post I saw last week. And the thing about you, Blake, is that you've always been very honest, very transparent. I'm sure you're this in real life, but through social media. Like, I remember you doing videos. You'd sit in your car most of the time doing these, selfie video at a time when no one else is doing them, really. It's, back, oh, wow, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And I just thought, well, that's so brave, not only to be honest and upfront and transparent, but to actually hold a bloody device and talk to it. But at this really, you were so focused on an area of health and fitness, I guess, that many of us weren't looking at. and that's the psychology and the mindset
Mm.
and what makes people tick. Um, so I guess maybe just jump in there, Blake, and just sort of, I don't know, like maybe explain why, how or why you were such an early adopter in
Mm.
that side of health, where most of us were just prescribing fucking burpees and, you know what I mean?
Yep, mate. Perfect. And yeah, and then see how that unfolds. So, mate, I'm more than happy to go down that path. That sounds great.
Yeah, cool. But yeah, just on that, like, because you had your 6 weeks to sexy. That was like a pretty big business back in the day.
Mm.
And that was obviously a key pillar within the business. So sort of share a little bit about how and why that was so important to you back then, to have that conversation with your clients about the psychology of, of adhering to a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, well, I think, it kind of all took shape from a number of different angles in terms of, and I don't know where, how you feel about this, but my own natural evolution started to happen as well. And that then drew me to wanting to have a bigger impact on my clients. Like you can obviously have a really big impact, and there's a lot of amazing people in the eastern suburbs that are having a big impact from a health and fitness point of view. But I just didn't feel, I think naturally I wanted to have a bigger impact than the sets, reps, and steamed broccolis that comes in the four walls of a gym. And probably, to be honest, on a selfish level, is I wanted to have deeper connections with people. Like I got to the point probably 5 years ago where I just couldn't personally handle the thought of seeing another person describe a squat. Like it didn't resonate with me anymore. And I remember, towards the back end, I haven't done a lot of work with media and publications for a while now, but they would ask me to put together the perfect 20-minute at home workout. And it had no, that was like drawing blood out of a stone for me. It was the most boring, tedious thing I could possibly do. And they were so drawn to it. So I naturally started to evolve a lot in understanding psychology for those reasons and for my own struggles. I come from a family of really strong addictions, mental illness, alcoholism. And, as I get older, and I'm sure you've probably got this with the juniors, is as I've got older, I've got more compassionate, which, compassion and empathy I had as a kid. And then it was kind of, drawn out of me for different reasons of don't be soft, people taking advantage of it, things like that. So I hardened through my teens and 20s and then started to turn it around more recently. But I wanted to understand, for me, empathy's easier with understanding, I find personally. So empathy, again, a trait that I've had to almost relearn over the last 5 years. I wanted to understand how people become addicts. I wanted to understand how you can see your family walk away from you and not be able to get on top of, your drinking problem or your gambling problem. I wanted to understand because, for me, I took it personally for most of my life of like, how can this person in my life, a close family member, not want any real connection with me and be happy for me to walk out on them. And in my head, the psychology was like, it's me or it's the bottle. I didn't understand how much of a grip addictions really do have. So that was one element. And, I guess naturally our passion will often stem from our pain and my pain of a lot of shit going horribly wrong in my own life, whether it be relationships, business, which I'll talk about soon because I haven't spoken much about some of the business struggles that I've had, and in the four walls of my family and my upbringing. So that's kind of where I started to go from a mental health, a peak performance, a psychology, human behavior point of view of the last 5 years, maybe 6 or 7 years now of wanting to understand humans better.
Yeah, and so just on that, is that a deep dive, like an exploration in textbooks and podcasts and literature research, or more sort of leaning back into that compassionate Blake and just naturally your own evolution of understanding about the human behavior? Or did you literally get amongst the books sort of thing?
Yeah, well, to be honest, that's part of the problem. Is, you know, through my late teens, like I remember going to Thailand, I think when I was 21, and you know, if you think about 21-year-olds, I took the Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding that Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is like probably 600 or 700 pages, around with me, you know, while the other boys were getting absolutely pissed. So my personal development has always been the thing, but also, you know, up until 30, 31, personal development takes you very much into your head. You know, that especially as a male, the analytical, the logical, that side. And from a compassion and an empathy point of view, it's a lot easier from an embodiment place, you know, in terms of being in your body. So while self-development, you know, in that formal context of reading and whatever else is really good, I've integrated it better now with understanding myself, you know, self-awareness, introspection, being in my body, feeling what I feel. And that's where the empathy and compassion comes from. Otherwise, you know, what an ex-girlfriend calls Coach Blake is this very methodical approach to connecting with people, which, you know, as I'm sure you're aware, doesn't really create the strongest bond. It can create healthy relationships because you understand how humans work, but they want to feel you, and feeling doesn't come in, you know, being in your head and being in that kind of analytical part of oneself the whole way.
So because you can get quite analytical and introspective and almost sort of disassociate at times or a period of time from the real world and real connection and stuff, do you feel like you've sort of coming out of that or have come out of that?
Yeah, it's big for me. You know, the disassociation from being in my body. You know, there's a lot of trauma as a kid, so the disassociation part makes a lot of sense for me as to why I didn't want to be in my body. So as I come more into my body, there's a lot of stuff that's coming up, which, you know, I wouldn't have dealt with or even processed or healed for 20, 25, 30 years. And just connections, you know, like I have been for most of my life a very flighty person. And, you know, when I look back at that now, and I think even when I met, you know, the likes of you and Libby and Luke and, you know, the gang that we all got along very well, to be honest, I'd be fucking pretty annoyed with someone like me back then, because it's a very flighty, disconnect, like not present type of person. And they're kind of annoying, those type of people. So as I've got more in my body and grounded myself better, my connections have been better. I've been more present, and essentially been less painful to other people as well, I think.
It's funny, like, yeah, that's not my interpretation of you at all. I actually, there was almost a little bit of envy, I guess, looking into you and your business. You just seem to be creating this empire, and you were tapping into that, as I said earlier, that really relevant and poignant aspect of health and fitness, which is the psychology, it's the mindset. So you were tapping into that when none of us are really addressing it, you know, more so prescribing squats and burpees, as I said. And just the sheer volume of clients you seem to have, I was like, I need to take this guy down.
It's a competitive space, the Eastern Suburbs. I appreciate those kind, envious words, but it's yeah. I mean, I feel kind of lucky in a certain way to, you know, I was a hopeless student, so anyone who speaks highly of my intellect, I feel very fond of that. But you know, I think that's probably something I feel fortunate that I've been able to see the writing on the wall a little bit, you know, even from a group training point of view. And the way we went with 6 weeks, that was one of the early adopters. You know, I think at that stage, CrossFit was around, and now you've got the F45s and everything that's kind of come through as a flow and effect from that. You know, the boot camp, I think, was the OG of group training. And then, you know, from there, CrossFit were probably the first ones to take group training indoors. And then, you know, we did it with 6 weeks, and now, you know, as you can see, it's kind of flooded with that space, and there's people doing it really well at this stage. And, you know, where I'm kind of evolving to now, I think will be the next stage of evolution around the human psychology, creating real deep connections, communities and tribes, which, you know, I kind of see the next piece of this puzzle being very much, you know, a loneliness epidemic, which is really sad and concerning. And, you know, this project that I'm kind of working on at the moment, we've got Momentum, the men's piece, and this tribe type thing that I'm, you know, starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together now. I just think, you know, if we can eradicate loneliness and have people in a community that they feel really connected to and challenged in a healthy way, and, you know, live a life probably more in alignment and purpose with what they're really about, then, you know, we'll eradicate a lot of the loneliness and even things like, you know, your depression and anxiety. And, you know, for me, I just can't imagine just existing, which I think a lot of people do. They, you know, they get up and they do the same thing and they're just kind of on this autopilot of existing. And you know, I really kind of want to shake them and wake them up in a very empathetic, you know, way, and help them find more to life, even if it's, you know, finding that one person who they can just, you know, bleed their heart and soul to and feel amazingly connected to that, then that's, you know, a reason to live as opposed to just existing.
I think, yeah, it's a really good point. I think having lived in the city for, I don't know, what was it, 17 years or something. It's only now, having moved up here, which is, you know, it's only, you know, 40 k's from the city, but the population density is dramatically lower. So I've made more friends probably in the last 12 months than I did in the last 10 years in Bondi. And it's not an attitudinal difference. You know, the people here are similar to the people in Bondi and vice versa. It's actually the sheer volume of the community that it's harder to initiate and create those bonds with people, because everyone's just busy doing their thing. And it's only been really in the last 12 months being here and forging some of those deep connections with people that I've realized that actually that is what life is all about. Great to strive for success. You should always try and work hard, but success isn't measured in monetary figures. It's not measured in the size of your house or your car. Me, I mean, it's a personal thing, but for me, it's like, do I have my health? Does my family have their health? Do I have love with my partner and the friends around me? And if you can tick most of those, like, that is success, I believe.
Mate, I couldn't agree more. And, you know, I know you speak of, you know, essentially what you value, but, you know, and I don't think any one value system is perfect, but if you look at, you know, the research and the science behind it, you never, like, you know, I spoke about this not that long ago, like, you're never going to get off, you know, for a lot of people, they're never going to get off that Ferris wheel or the hamster wheel of what society deems success, you know, materialism, status, money, ego-driven things. And, you know, you and I have both lived in the eastern suburbs long enough to know those are real driving factors in the eastern suburbs, more so than anywhere in Australia, I think. And it's not hard to see the correlation between that, the amount of people that are lonely, anxious, depressed, you know, suicidal, having, you know, domestic violence. Like, it's, you know, away from all the glamour and the stuff that's happening behind the scenes is an absolute shitstorm, which not many people, you know, at least in my time in the eastern suburbs, were talking about. So it's concerning. And, you know, for those that from the outside looking into the eastern suburbs, it does look very shiny and it does look fun. And, you know, the eastern suburbs is a bit of a, you know, amusement park in different ways, but there's also a lot of people that are really kind of lonely and feeling disconnected and feeling on that hamster wheel. And, you know,
how do you get around that? I guess my point was that even with, you know, high density, there's people above you, beside you, below you, everywhere in the city. That real emotion of feeling lonely despite being surrounded by people. And that's simply born out out of, you know, as I said, everyone's too busy doing their own thing and people don't make eye contact and say hello at coffee shops like they do in a smaller community. So I wonder how, you know, on your crusade, on your mission to lower that loneliness rate or that feeling of being lonely, like how does that person living in a highly populated urban area break through and make those deep connections? There's probably no one answer, but
well, I think one of the challenges that you have is if you don't know what you stand for, then you will become a byproduct of the environment that you're in. So if you know that, you know, from a values point of view, connection fills your soul, then, and you keep coming back to, okay, what do I value? What really fills me up? Then you can stay strong and aligned with that. You know, when I moved to Sydney, I didn't know what I stood for. And I became, you know, the product of the environment where, you know, the eastern suburbs has this anxious energy where you are the rat race, and it's, you know, it's me versus you. And that's never going to be a recipe for happiness and connection in the long run. Do you know what I mean? Like you know, are you looking to kind of collab and connect, or are you looking to compete? And, you know, while on a deep DNA level, we have this element of competition, and that's, you know, what it was about 1,000 years ago when you were competing with tribes for food or for women or whatever it might have been. It just doesn't, it's never going to hit the sweet spot. You know, there's a really good study that's in, I think it's in Lost Connections, and they get people from different countries to go out and go, okay, if you want to breed more happiness, what do you do? Australia, UK and US go out and like feed their own soul as well, not even soul, feed themselves in terms of go out and buy stuff, you know, ego, status, money, material. Whereas Taiwan, I think Denmark and maybe Japan or something go and do things for other people. And, you know, you see their rates of happiness, you know, go massively up, and, you know, our rates of happiness just flatline. So, you know, if you look at it from a society point of view, like we're driven to do that. You know, we've got this belief, we've got this societal expectation and conditioning that draws us to that, but it's, you know, it doesn't work. Like it, I mean, you have to just look at the mental health numbers and, you know, suicide numbers and everything to know that the system that we're following isn't working for us.
So what is it you're working on at the moment? So the system is all done and dusted?
Yeah, so that was done, I think 3 years ago now. And one of the things for me, you know, and I don't know how things sit with you, but for 12 months prior to me shutting it down, it was dead inside me, you know, and I feel super fortunate that, what was I doing? PT for, you know, close to 16 years, 15 out of the 16 I loved. And that's amazing for someone to find a passion and for it to last that long. But in that last year, it just died within me. And that was the natural, you know, evolution and progression towards where I'm am now and where I'm going. And then, you know, I shut that down. And even to a few people's, you know, confusion, I shut it down. I didn't try to sell it. I didn't try to, you know, get someone else to run it. I just shut it down. It was dead inside me. And then I moved to Melbourne and I did a couple of management roles there, and failed at them miserably for a couple of reasons. And one being that, again, you know, management for me of a franchise gym didn't light my soul up at all. And, you know, I thought I was covering it pretty well because I wanted to hold a steady job while I was working out, you know, what my next evolution looked like. But the managers fired me pretty quickly, knowing that I wasn't doing my job properly and I didn't look like I wanted to be there, which is, you know, completely true. And,
you know, wanted to have a break from that that type of prescription for health and fitness. You know what I mean? Like the workouts and
yeah.
Because I ran mine for like 14 years, and I was like, much similar to you. Like loved most moments and most years in that period, but at the end, when I decided I needed to move on, there was probably about a 2 year, 2 years I still hadn't jumped out with both feet. There was like, I made the decision. So I almost like consciously left the building, but I was still you know, going to my little spot down at Bondi Park, and some mornings hating life, just like,
Yeah.
what the fuck am I doing? I've got to get out of this. Like, but didn't know. I mean, in the end, I just sent an email to all my clients on a Sunday night saying, sorry, there's no training tomorrow or ever. I
Yeah.
recommend following trainers if you want to work out with someone else.
Mm.
And it probably looked like a haphazard sort of flippant decision or a sort of knee jerk, but it had been brewing for like 18 months, 2 years, until just a moment. I can't even really recall what it was. I was like, I can't do it tomorrow.
Mm.
And of course that puts you in a financial hole for a bit, because you're like, well, not at this point. Back to your point about the growth and birth of CrossFit, F45, yoga, Pilates, fill in the gap. That had like pulled a lot of revenue away from those boot camps, me being one of them. So it's not like I was making a heap of money, but I was still making, you know, I was paying my rent. So making that decision to give that up meant that I had to find something else. And I, you know, I've learned many times over the years that it's actually when your back's against the wall that things move the quickest. You know, you have ideas, you have to, like, it's that heightened state of arousal with a bit of urgency. You know, like, that's when you're thinking the quickest, and not every thought is like, you know, particularly helpful, but you know, it's when you're resting on your laurels that you're not creative, right? When everything's going hunky-dory, why fire that side up, you know?
Mate, that's exactly how it was for me. I think one of the challenges, you know, if we're talking about the masculine and feminine, for those that are kind of new to those terms, we actually have both within us, you know, masculine and feminine. But, you know, if you're kind of a stronger masculine, then you are drawn to, you know, your fire is lit when you have a sense of purpose, passion, or mission. So in that period of time, you know, it was 18 months, shit hit the fan in so many different ways for me. You know, and in all of that, the biggest challenge was being directionless and purposeless. And, you know, there's, again, not many people out there who are like, oh yeah, that's normal. That's part of the evolution. But for me, I was like, fuck, am I a loser? You know, 35, I'm not sure what this next part looks like. I know it's something to do with coaching, but I don't really know what it looks like. And that was hard. That, you know, a lot of my manhood, and, you know, as I come back to kind of the masculine, a lot of the masculine's manhood essentially is built on having some kind of direction, passion, purpose. So just kind of floating in no man's land was really challenging for me. Really challenging.
Your identity, right? You're like, Blake the coach, Blake the this. And so if you pull away from that and you dissolve that, it's like you are left flapping a little bit. You're like, okay, what is my purpose? But also, what's my new identity? If there's going to be a new identity, like, it's quite unsettling. So then what happened after that?
Well, so yeah, I think when I shut down the business, it was that 18 months of transition, so to speak. And, you know, there's a lot of hits, like hit after hit in that period of time. Girlfriend, you know, getting fired from 3 jobs that ended up being in like a 9-month period. Cars broken into, cars breaking down, you know, moving 3 states. It was just hit after hit. But eventually what happened was I actually did a ayahuasca ceremony, which for those in Australia, it's illegal. So, you know, as groundbreaking as it was, I'm not really allowed to promote it, even though I think it's extremely beneficial. And then a couple of days later, this idea, you know, that we kind of formed around momentum kind of came to life. And, you know, for probably 12 months, 18 months before that, you know, a lot of clients have been like, mate, like with the way that you're going and what you speak about, you really need to tap into the men's space. And I'd resisted it for so long, you know, naturally, I think probably similar to you, like we drew a lot of female clientele and I just didn't think I had kind of the repertoire to work, you know, primarily with blokes. And that came to me a couple of days after ayahuasca, and, you know, I rang up a mate who was in Sri Lanka and I was like, I've got this idea. And he's like, yeah, cool. Didn't kind of think much of it. And then I rang another mate in Melbourne, and we kind of formed it that way. And I kind of look at the men's space at the moment, go, there's a lot of people out there doing stuff for our type of kind of Aussie blokes, so to speak. There isn't many options that are that inviting. It's still got a very strong stigma around, kind of being a bit cringy and a bit weird and a bit too left for blokes that are dipping their toe in for the first time. And we really wanted to make something that was appealing and accessible. Because again, if you're dipping your toe in for the first time and the first exercise you do is eye gazing with a bloke for 5 minutes, it's probably going to be the first and last time you open that can of worms. So that was the first thing that we started to kind of cultivate, which was, September last year, and that's starting to move in a really fun, healthy direction. It takes a bit of time to kind of get grip. And honestly, I think, I look at the men's space and it's starting to shift, but I almost think of it as, what dating apps was 5 years ago. There's people doing it, but not really talking about it. And now it's, standard practice. So I think, as in terms of normalizing the men's space and men doing work, we're probably still 3 to 5 years away from that becoming mainstream. But we, like to think that we've positioned ourselves nicely to be a first point of call when those blokes eventually open that can of worms.
So it's a men's group that promotes and encourages like sharing, like a mental health kind of. So the exercise and all that's in the past. So it's like a workshop, is it? Like a seminar?
Yeah, it's. I mean, the way that we kind of describe it is blokes who come to us are coming anywhere from pain to performance. So we actually just brought on a psychologist because obviously if there's some kind of real heavy stuff, we're not equipped to deal with that. But they might be coming to us real dark, or they might be coming to us to just tweak some things to kind of overcome some barriers and blocks that are stopping them from going to the next level. So, but the general basis is that most blokes that come to us are very kind of, mainstream Aussie blokes who love a beer, love watching the footy, whatever it might be, but have been real resistant to doing the work. So that was project one. And then project two that I'm working on is that tribe piece of like-minded people. One of the struggles I found through my kind of, 20s and the first bit of my 30s was always feeling like I just didn't fit the system, and the status quo and the 2.5 kids and following, the norm. And again, for me in the 20s, I was like, what the fuck's wrong with me? Like the way everyone's doing life just doesn't seem to resonate with me at all. And as I started to share these messages, around these, wanting to, kind of wanting to be the adventurer and the explorer and do things different to the way the normies were doing it, I realized there's a lot of people in their, within their groups who feel like, I love these people and they're brilliant guys or girls or whatever, but I just feel like I'm different to them. Like I'm big on personal development and they don't care. Or I'm big on, taboo topics like really exploring sexuality and they're like, fuck, you're weird. And feeling this sense of judgment or being different. And again, I feel kind of fortunate that I'm probably one of those people who puts myself out there with a lot of stuff that doesn't fit the mold. And that creates, all types of problems in the past in terms of losing friends, people kind of questioning, judging me. But, I kind of feel that's part of my path is to step into those awkward spaces that most people aren't kind of prepared to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we're pretty, as a whole, I mean, I'm quite lucky in the sense that I got a number of close friends that, they speak from their heart and there's honesty and transparency. But on the whole, blokes are pretty useless at conveying how they feel. Other talk about the weather and surfing and the footy and stuff. But I think to your point about there's more supportive organisations in this field than that there has ever been. I mean, the whole mental health thing, like that wasn't I mean, it's always been a thing, but that label, I mean, it's in the last 10 years, I reckon. And all these, Are You Okay? All these organisations that are there to support support mental health. So yeah, you're probably right. In the next sort of 2 or 3 years, we're going to have a greater number of these things and a greater acceptance that it is the norm. And I think anything that encourages guys to speak with one another, not about the footy or the weather or the surfing, that deeper level stuff, because we're not immune to it. Like we have our trials and tribulations and struggles. And I mean, I personally had a bit of an episode, which is kind of why your post about being in hospital last year resonated with me so deeply, is that I was in hospital earlier on this year around May. And that's because for about 18 months, I'm sort of shouldering all this pressure and anxiety with no real like release valve. You know, I don't want to share with Matilda because I don't feel like that's an acceptable thing to do, or the frequency in which it's helpful. You know, every once a week or once a fortnight we might share, but actually the reality is I want to talk about this fucking all the time because I'm shouldering it all. And it was actually the most important, or not the most important, the most pivotal moment for me, in that, let's say I was depressed or thereabouts, definitely anxious for about 18 months. The most critical moment, pivotal moment, was actually saying those words out of my mouth to Matilda. I think you're right, babe. I think I'm depressed. At that point, even, you know, what I'm getting at is that sharing, that deeper level, cerebral stuff, emotional stuff, heartfelt stuff. In that moment, it was like so much weight had lifted from my shoulders, and I still had a heap of work to do to like sort of navigate how I get out of it, how I climb out of it. But in that moment, and I just feel like for anyone who might be listening and has an opportunity to either, you know, talk with their friends over a cup of coffee or jump in with what you're doing, I think there's a lot of gravity to talking and sharing. That as men, we skirt around it. We kind of avoid it as best we can. But it's in our DNA to be, you know, strong and resilient and the provider. And if those are challenged, you know, we just upregulate. You know, we puff our chest up and we sort of, no, I am fucking strong. I am resilient. But inside we're fucking crumbling because we're not doing A, B, and C. So after that moment of speaking to Till and having those words leave my mouth, I still had a lot of work to do. So I went to see a psychologist, and that was again pivotal. Probably had about a dozen sessions with him. You know, there were some weeks there that was the best hour of my week, you know.
Yeah.
Certainly some of the days best hour of my day. Because you need that. You need someone sometimes that can hold the keys to your past. They know how to tap into things that happened in your past, you know, trauma. They can help you join the dots and make sense of it all. So did you explore that at all? Like, did you go and see?
Yeah, mate. I've seen a lot of people over the years, and you know, I think even one of the challenges I had is probably at different points being too reliant on that person. And what I mean by that is, did you ever meet Teagues, my ex?
No, I don't think so.
Nah. You know, when I was going through that really rough period, it was either my coach or Teagues. And she's like, you've got the most fucking amazing people around you, like really good, savvy, wise friends, and you don't speak to them. And, you know, in hindsight, when I look at it now, kind of similar, I think, to you know, what you were saying, if I'm reading between the lines, is it's not fair on Teagues to shoulder all of the weight. Yes, you know, it's important for me to communicate, but that's not fair that, like, she shoulders all of that. And, you know, realistically, with the friendship group that I do have, I could have shifted, you know, a little bit of weight off each person by connecting with them and talking about my struggles than, you know, it'd either been the coach or been her. And that obviously, you know, she caught me at the worst of times when, you know, through that 18 months of just getting endless hits by life and getting smacked in the balls, but which eventually becomes the catalyst, you know, or part of the catalyst for the breakdown of the relationship. But I think it's, you know, it's really important for blokes, one, to talk to their partner, and two, also to have other outlets. You know, like if it means that you start by talking to your partner, that's super important, because most females do complain about it. But being able to kind of shoulder that responsibility a little bit on partner and a coach, or partner, coach, and, you know, a mate, the fact that you can shoulder that a little bit, or kind of, you know, play it out a little bit between different people is important. But what was it that eventually was the catalyst for you speaking to Matilda, and what stopped you from speaking to her, you know, to that depth in the 18 months before, do you reckon?
Well, I know for sure what it was. So I sort of touched on it as a partner, as a man. We're there to be the provider, the big grizzly bear, you know.
Yeah.
Everyone's safe, keep everyone
Yeah.
protected, and provide in a not just an emotional way, but a financial way. And I wasn't doing the latter. You know, a few startups that hadn't gone as commercially as I hoped, and so I wasn't earning enough to fulfill me as a provider. So I can't share with her because it's emasculating, you know, like it's crushing down to my DNA, because I'm not being that grizzly, you know, the big father bear. So I couldn't share with her. But on the day that I did, you know, sort of 18 months, maybe even 2 years in, I was immobilized. So I remember I was lying on the couch just in here, and my son was calling me from the garage below because he needed help looking for something. And he was, Dad, can you help me? And I was like, I can't even get off the lounge. But I got off the lounge and I got out the front door and halfway down this path here, and I just started crying. I walked back in while he's going, Dad, where are you, kind of thing. And I just got back on the lounge and I was like, I think you're right, babe, because she'd been saying it for some time. I was like, no, I'm not depressed. Like, I'm not where I want to be, but I'm not depressed. But in that moment, I was like, fuck, I think I'm depressed. And the thing with depression is, like, you don't get an email, you don't get a red flag. Like, nobody taps you on the shoulder. For me, it was like this slow moving, slow building accumulation of stress and anxiety. And if it's there long enough, it actually rewires you. It actually puts you in a different frame of mind. And that was where I was for at least 18 months, I reckon. But she wasn't the person that I could share with, because I felt a failure as a man.
Yeah.
She doesn't subscribe to all that shit anyway, but it was hard for me, and still is. Like, I'm still struggling to kind of, you know, be the big provider that I want to be. So there's all that sort of running in the background, but I've actually, in many ways, it's helped me reposition what success is. And as I said earlier, it's like success to me now is the health of me and my family and my loved ones, and connection, and, you know, love and support. Like, that's wealth in itself. And sure, if you can make a bit of money to pay your rent and have a bit left over, then happy days. But so that's why I couldn't share with her, because it was
mate, resonate massively. Same thing with, you know, Teagues. And, you know, what's really interesting about the male kind of psyche, often, whether it's pride, ego, a mix of, you know, everything in between, is, you know, unfortunately for a lot of blokes, they'd rather suffer the ultimate consequence of taking their own life than to wave the white flag, you know, whether it's as a result of social conditioning, you know, the expectations that they think they should show up, you know, the pressure that they might be receiving, externally. And I remember, with Teagues, it wasn't her, all she wanted to do was see me get out of my rut. And the pressure that I felt there to get out of my rut was as bad as anything. I remember having, a really kind of brief thought where I was like, I fucking get why blokes just jump. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm at rock bottom, and I'm like, I wanted to make it work with her, and similar to you, I wanted to be the provider, I wanted to be the masculine, I wanted to kind of be the man of the house. And it's unfortunate that from an emasculation point of view, that our financial status plays a role in that. But again, it's deeply ingrained in us from however many generations ago to be that person. And I think women have a lot of pressure in different ways, absolutely, and blokes probably don't talk about the pressure that they're feeling. And when we're building momentum, we spent 3 months doing research, and a lot of blokes were really struggling with like asking themselves, I don't know what it means to show up as a man. I don't know how to juggle these balls. I don't know how to, love properly with my heart. Like, it's an absolute shitstorm. And, I think it's made tougher by the fact that for a lot of us, there's not that many good male role models. My whole upbringing was very much what not to do in terms of, one alcoholic parent and an abusive other one. Like, that doesn't create a good set of programming for, here's a bit of a blueprint, or here's a bit of a roadmap as to, how to show up as a good bloke and, do well in society. And when you start to really understand your programming and the mess that you've brought along for the ride, then, my last 5 years is about, essentially deconditioning myself from the conditions that I had for 30 odd years. So it's a massive challenge. And I know, we've got our what's that, mate?
I'll just say, like, breaking the mold, like this mold that sort of forged you with your parents being alcoholic or abusive, like it's forged who you are. So it's important for you and future generations of Blake to break that mold. And it sounds like you've done you're doing just that. So I think there was a time lag there.
Yeah, and that's... Oh, I've got you back now. I think that's, from a momentum point of view, and obviously what I want to create as a person, I think that's the best thing that we can do is create generational change. Otherwise I just pass it on to the next generations of Worrell Thompsons that come through, and that's not good for anyone.
What's the plan with that?
Well, for me, it's in terms of
Kids
making Worrell Thompsons, or in terms of changing things. No, make it. I'll hold out on that one for a little bit longer. But no, I think it's just, I feel like there's a responsibility on me to keep showing up a better version for myself, for my, future partner, future kids, but also just to lead by example. I really think that with the change that we want to make, that we need to be the example of that. And from a leadership point of view, it's important to practice what you preach. And, I'm super transparent in, through my socials, that I don't have all my shit sorted and I don't have all the answers. And, social media is such an illusion that people have got it all sorted. And, a lot of people in that space end up getting put on pedestals that they just can't, hold to, which is unfair on them. And also on the flip side, so many people end up questioning their own lives, thinking that these people through social media have got this, shiny, glossy life. So, for me, one of the big things is probably to show more struggle than I do wins, to really normalize life, and not to have too many people under the illusion that I've got it all sorted.
How how did you get to hospital? Not how did you get to hospital, but you know, what was the reason you went to hospital?
Well, it ended up being well, they thought it was meningococcal. I was literally driving to the gym one morning and started blacking out. And just my body just was so like cold and sweating and I literally couldn't move. And meningococcal, if you get it, it's not ideal. So I ended up in hospital with a whole bunch of tests. But ironically, and probably not too dissimilar to the parts of the story that you shared, like that was my bottom. That was the proper bottom. Every little hit that I had over that 18 months felt like, oh, this has to be it. Do you know what I mean? And then that was the actual bottom of the barrel. And I've been fortunate. While for most people 2020 has been a shock of a year, it's been as good for me as any year I've had, as I've kind of started to climb back out of the barrel. So unfortunately for blokes, probably more so than females, we really need to bottom out before we learn our lessons and start to change. And realistically, we get a lot of whispers along the way of like, this isn't working for you, or you need to change something here. But it's not, for most of us, it's not until the steam train comes through and really wipes us out that we're like, oh, okay, I need to make some changes. So that was my steam train.
Yeah, right. Well, Blake, I want to just say thanks for your time. With the connection doesn't seem that red hot at the moment, but I just want to say thanks for your time, but also more to that than, I guess, thank you for because you are a bit of a anomaly is not the right word, but maybe a thought leader or an early adopter of this, like broadcasting real, open and honest dialogue on socials. And you've been doing it, as I said, for a long time. I probably 2012, I remember seeing stuff online. I just think it is refreshing. There's not enough of us doing it. Most of us put up, as you say, these shiny, glossy versions of ourselves, and that in itself puts a lot of pressure on that person, but also the follower. They see that and there's something that they need to equal or aspire to, and it's just not realistic most of the time. So in saying all that, there's a lot of admiration for, even though there's a bit of envy in the early days, that's past now. It's just admiration for your honesty and your transparency, mate. So keep doing what you're doing, and good luck with all the men's group. That's really, really important.
Mate, I appreciate that, and love your honesty as well in everything that you said about our past. It's been a good kind of 8 or 9 years that we've been in each other's world, albeit from a distance. And I'm glad that you have been able to kind of speak openly about your struggle as well, which I think really does help normalize it for other people that are going through their stuff. So if we can continue to show up a little bit more authentically and a little bit more real, then I hope other people feel safe and comfortable and they're not alone in their struggle.
Yeah, that's great. Well, good on you, Blake. Keep doing what you're doing. I'll speak to you soon.
Beautiful. Thanks, mate.
Take it easy.